She had been sitting in her car for 2 hours and 17 minutes when her engine stopped turning over. Loretta Mae Sims did not panic. She tried the key twice more, the way people try things they know are finished, because trying is the last form of hope available. And then she set her hands in her lap and looked at the windshield and looked at the hospital across the parking lot with its windows lit and its emergency entrance glowing red-white into the November dark, and she thought, this is how it ends. Not from the car, not from the dead battery or the cold coming in through the door seals or the fact that her phone was at 11% and she did not know who to call. She had known for 3 hours and 40 minutes how it ended. She had been sitting in this parking lot since the appointment, because the appointment had produced a piece of information she was not yet ready to take home and put inside her house on Birchwood Lane. Inside the rooms where Henry's chair was still in the corner and his reading glasses were still on the side table, because she had not moved them. And she was not going to move them, and she could not yet go back to that house carrying what Dr. Morales had told her. She had not told anyone. There was no one to tell. Not tonight. Not yet. She thought, no one knows I'm here. She thought, I have been alone before, and I have been fine, and I will be fine. She thought, with the specific clarity that comes at the end of a long day and a longer appointment and 2 hours and 17 minutes in a cold car, I am very tired. What she did not know, what she could not have known, was that 60 feet away, on the far side of the parking lot, a man named Nate Corbin had been watching her car for 2 hours and 14 minutes, not because he was looking for her, not because he had been sent or called or directed, because he was where he always was at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night in November, sitting on his Harley in the far corner of Decatur Memorial's east parking lot, watching the lit windows of the hospital building across the way a man watches something he cannot get closer to. He had not meant to notice her. He noticed her anyway. The east parking lot of Decatur Memorial Hospital sat at the edge of the medical complex off Greenwood Avenue, bordered on 2 sides by the service road, and on the third by a stand of oaks that had shed everything by mid-November, and stood in the parking lot light like things that had given up on aesthetics and decided just to endure. The lot smelled like cold asphalt and the faint chemical sweetness of the hospital's ventilation system, and the light it operated under was the particular institutional light of a place that never fully goes dark, fluorescent islands at 12-foot intervals, every third one slightly yellower than the others, the whole effect landing somewhere between clinical and lonely. It was 11 at night, a Thursday in November. The lot was 2/3 empty at this hour, the day visitors gone, the night shift staff parked closer to the entrance, the remaining cars belonging to people in waiting rooms who were not thinking about their cars. The temperature was 31 degrees. The sky had the look of a sky that had clouds in it you couldn't see, the kind that absorbed the city light from below and give it back as a flat gray ceiling. This was not a place that had ever been cheerful. It had been functional, which is what hospital parking lots are. Functional and cold and lit well enough to see, and that was the full extent of its ambitions. Nate Corbin had been coming here for 8 months. He was 52 years old, broad across the shoulders in the way that comes from years of physical work and not from a gym, with a beard gone mostly gray, and the kind of face that had been through enough weather, literal and otherwise, to have settled into something that no longer needed to perform anything. He wore a Hells Angels cut with an Illinois bottom rocker and a sergeant-at-arms patch, and a road captain's pin he had stopped wearing 6 months ago, for reasons he had not explained to anyone. He had been riding since he was 23, and the bike under him now, a 2014 Softail, had 84,000 miles on it, and did not have a single mile it hadn't earned. He had been heading, 8 months ago, to a chapter meeting on the north side of Decatur, when his phone had buzzed with a voicemail from his daughter. had pulled into the hospital lot to listen to it, because the lot was quiet, and he needed quiet for the kind of voicemail his daughter left, which were never short and never easy, and which he listened to twice before responding. The voicemail had told him that she was a nurse now, had passed her boards, was working nights at Decatur Memorial starting that week, and that she wanted him to know because she was aware that he drove past this hospital on the way to the Northside chapter, and she did not want him to drive past it without knowing she was inside it. They had not spoken in 3 years, properly, not since the thing that had happened at his brother's funeral that he was still looking for the right words to address. She was 31. She was a nurse. She was inside that building at 11 o'clock on Thursday nights. He did not call her. He did not go in. He was not ready for what calling or going in might open, because the conversation they needed to have was not a parking lot conversation, and was not a voicemail conversation, and was a conversation he had been trying to find the beginning of for 3 years. So he sat in the parking lot. Every Thursday, because she worked Thursday nights, and he knew that now, and sitting in the parking lot at 11 o'clock with the hospital lights visible, was the closest thing to being near her he had permitted himself, which was not much, but it was what he had. He had been in that lot for 3 hours on this particular Thursday when the woman in the silver Civic 3 rows over tried her ignition the second time, and he heard the dead click of a battery that had made its final decision. He watched her sit. He watched the windows. He waited for her to call someone, or get out of the car, or do the thing a person does when a car won't start in a hospital parking lot at 11 at night. She did none of those things. She sat still. Before we get to what Nate Corbin saw when he finally crossed those 3 rows of parking lot, if you're watching for the first time, hit subscribe and drop your city and state in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. I read every single one. Now, back to that parking lot in Decatur, Illinois. And the woman in the silver Civic, because who Loretta Sims was before that night is what makes everything Nate did carry the weight that it carries. Loretta Mae Sims was born in 1952 in Decatur, which she had never left except for a year in Springfield right after high school that she counted as travel. She was 71 years old. She had been a bookkeeper for the same hardware company on East William Street for 29 years, retiring at 67 with a watch and a cake and a card signed by people she had worked beside for 3 decades, and who she still saw at the grocery store and still loved, in the mild, reliable way you love people who have been woven into the ordinary fabric of your days. She had been married to Henry Sims for 44 years before he died of a stroke on a Wednesday morning in March, sitting in his chair by the window, reading the newspaper, which was the way he had spent every Wednesday morning for as long as Loretta could remember, and which meant, she had thought afterward, that he had gone out in the middle of his own life exactly as it was, which was perhaps not the worst way. Henry had been a man who laughed at his own jokes before he finished them, which should have been annoying, and was somehow never annoying. He had called her Lou, which no one else had ever called her, and which she still heard sometimes in her own kitchen when she was making the oatmeal she had been making for 44 years for 2 people, and was still making for one because she did not know how to make less of it, and because making it was something Henry would have done, and she was not going to stop doing what Henry would have done. She had a daughter in Columbus named Marie who called twice a week, and a son in Rockford named Tom who called on Sundays. She had 4 grandchildren she saw 3 times a year. She had neighbors who brought things when she was sick, and a church that knew her name, and the hardware store people at the grocery store. She was not a woman without people. She was a woman who had not yet told any of her people what Dr. Morales had said. She had found out 3 months ago that something was wrong. She had found out 3 weeks ago how wrong. She had been sitting with the specific weight of it. a weight that is hard to describe to anyone who has not carried a piece of information they are not yet ready to distribute, who knows that the moment they say it aloud it will become the thing everyone is managing, and that the people they love most will rearrange their lives around it, and that the rearrangement will begin a process that has an end she is not ready to look at directly yet. She still wrote Christmas cards to Henry every year. She had done it the first December after he died, half out of habit and half out of something she couldn't fully name. And she had kept doing it every December since. She wrote his name on the envelope in the careful cursive she had used since school, and then she drew one line through it, slowly, and kept the card. She kept them in the drawer of his side table, beside the reading glasses she had not moved. She deserved to go home to his chair and his glasses and tell him what Dr. Morales had said, the way she had told him everything for 44 years. She deserved someone to sit beside her in the dark of the car and not require anything from her until she was ready. She did not know that someone already was. At 11:22, Nate Corbin got off his bike. He had watched the car for 22 minutes since the second ignition click. He had watched it the way he watched things from the corner of a parking lot in the dark, with the full peripheral attention of someone who has learned to read situations from a distance, and who had been reading this one with increasing concern since the click. No one had gotten out. No interior light had come on for a phone call. No movement. Nothing. He crossed the parking lot in the cold, his breath coming in visible clouds, the sound of his boots on the asphalt carrying in the November quiet. He stopped beside the driver's window and looked in. The woman inside was in her 70s, in a good coat, with white hair and the composed, contained expression of someone who was working very hard at something that had nothing to do with the dead car. She was looking straight ahead through the windshield at the hospital entrance. She had her hands in her lap. She was not crying. She was simply present, in the specific way people are present when they have come to the end of their ability to be anywhere else. He knocked on the window. Gently, not the knock of someone who needed something, the knock of someone who was checking. She turned and looked at him. She saw the cut. She saw the patches. She saw a large man in leather crouching beside her car window in a hospital parking lot at 11 at night. And she did the thing that most people would do, which was to take a breath and pull herself slightly inward. He held up both hands. Open, empty, battery, he said. One word through the glass. She looked at him for a moment. Then she rolled the window down 2 inches. I think so, she said. You call someone? She was quiet for a moment. My son is in Rockford, she said. My daughter's in Columbus. She said it the way people state facts they have already made peace with. I was thinking about who to call. She looked at the hospital entrance. Thinking, she said again. Nate looked at the hospital too. He looked at the lit entrance and the lit windows and the flat gray sky and the oak trees at the lot's edge, and then he looked back at the woman in the car with her hands in her lap and the particular expression of a person who is not in distress about the battery. I'm Nate, he said. She looked at him through the 2-inch gap. She did something that required a specific kind of courage, which was to decide, in a parking lot at 11 at night, that a stranger deserved the truth. I had an appointment today, she said. I didn't want to go home yet. Nate didn't say anything. He didn't ask. He crouched down against the car door, which put him lower than the window, and he waited. She talked for 20 minutes. Not about everything. Not the whole thing. Not all at once. She talked about Henry and the chair and the oatmeal. She talked about Dr. Morales and the specific vocabulary of medicine that sounds like information about someone else. She talked about the Christmas cards in the drawer. She talked about Tom in Rockford and Marie in Columbus and the 4 grandchildren and the way she had been sitting with the information for 3 weeks because she did not know how to put it down in front of thee. People who would rearrange their lives around it, and she loved them too, much. To begin the rearrangement before she was ready, Nate crouched against the car in 31-degree weather and listened. He did not offer solutions. He did not say it would be okay. He did not fill the silences with the things people fill silences with when they are uncomfortable with grief and want to move through it to something more manageable. He held the silences the way a person holds them, when they understand that the silence is part of what is being said. When she finished, not resolved, not concluded, just arrived at a natural stopping place, she was quiet for a moment. "I don't know why I told you all that," she said. "I was here," Nate said. She looked at him. He was still crouched against her door in the cold, his breath in visible clouds, entirely unhurried. "Your knees must be freezing," she said. "They are," he said. She laughed. It was quiet and real. "The first one in 3 weeks, probably. Let me find you a jump," he said. "Then I'll follow you home." She started to say she didn't need that, which was the kind of thing she said by habit, and then she stopped. Because the truth was that she did need that, and she was tired of habit, at least for tonight. "All right," she said. The jump came from a man named Al, who worked hospital security, and who Nate had spoken to twice in 8 months of parking lot Thursdays, and who appeared with cables within 4 minutes of being called. Because Al was the kind of man who moved at one speed when someone needed something, which was the right speed. The Civic started on the first try. Al said goodnight and went back inside. Nate got his bike. He followed Loretta Sims home. Not close, 2 car lengths back, which was enough to be present and not enough to feel like surveillance. She drove the way she did everything, it seemed, carefully, without wasted motion, through the November streets of Decatur toward Birchwood Lane. She pulled into the driveway of a house with a porch light on and a front door with a wreath on it, the kind of wreath that goes up in October and comes down when someone gets around to it in February, and she got out of the car and looked back at Nate on the bike at the end of the drive. He raised one hand. She raised one hand. He waited until she was inside and the lights were on. Then he sat in the street for a moment, engine idling, looking at the lit windows of the house on Birchwood Lane. He took out his phone. He looked at it for a moment. He texted his road captain 4 words, Thursday night. "Call me." His road captain read the text and called in 30 seconds. Nate talked for 7 minutes. He described the parking lot and Loretta Sims and Henry's chair and the Christmas cards in the drawer and 3 weeks of sitting alone with a piece of information and a dead battery at 11 at night. He described what it looked like when a person had been sitting too long with something they hadn't said yet. His road captain was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What do you need?" What Nate needed, though he did not say it in those words, was for Loretta Sims to know that the parking lot did not have to be where she sat alone, that the weight of the information could be distributed, even among people she did not know, even among people she had not chosen, even among people who had shown up on a Thursday night because someone had sent 4 words to a road captain who had understood what 4 words meant. His road captain made 6 calls. Each of those 6 calls made 4 more. By midnight, the message had moved through 3 Illinois chapters and crossed into the Indiana contacts, and the question moving through the chain was simple, and the answers came back the same way. Saturday afternoon. "Decatur. What time?" 2 o'clock, Nate said. "Birchwood Lane." 984 motorcycles is not a small number for a residential street on a Saturday afternoon. The neighbors on Birchwood Lane understood something was happening before the first engine turned the corner. because the sound traveled ahead of the column the way the sound of many engines always does, low and specific and unlike anything else, building from the south end of the street to the north in the time it took the column to fill the block. Nate had called Loretta on Friday morning. He had told her what was coming. She had been quiet for a long time. "Why?" she said. He thought about it. "Because you're carrying something that's too heavy for one person," he said. "And because nobody should have to sit in a parking lot alone at 11 o'clock for 3 hours before anyone notices." She was quiet again. "I don't need anyone to fix anything," she said. "Nobody's trying to fix anything," he said. "They just want to be there." She was quiet for a long time. "Nate," she said. "Yes, I still have half a dozen coffee cakes in the freezer from when Henry died," she said. "People brought them and I couldn't eat them. I've been taking them out every few weeks when I can't sleep." "I'll let them know," he said. She laughed again. "The second one in 3 weeks." Engines filled Birchwood Lane at 2 o'clock on a Saturday in November. A column of 94 motorcycles moving in formation down the residential street with its established oaks and its October wreaths, still on the doors, and its neighbors appearing on porches with the uncertain expression of people who have not been told what is happening and are in the process of deciding how to feel about it. They parked the full length of the block. Both sides. The engines died in a wave from the front of the column to the back, and when the last one went silent, Birchwood Lane held a quiet it had probably not held since before the neighborhood was a neighborhood. The specific quiet of 94 people who had arrived somewhere and were waiting for what came next. Loretta Mae Sims opened her front door. She stood on the porch in her good coat, the same coat she had been wearing in the parking lot. Because it was her good coat, and this seemed like an occasion for it, and she looked at 94 motorcycles parked bumper to bumper along her residential street, and 94 men standing beside them, and she was silent. Not the silence of someone who did not know what to say, the silence of someone for whom what they were looking at had not yet become a thing language was adequate to. Nate walked up the path to the porch. He stopped at the bottom step. "Coffee cake?" he said. She looked at him. She looked at the street. She pressed her lips together in the specific way people do when they are trying not to cry and have decided they are not going to. And then she laughed. And then she stopped trying not to cry and simply did both at once. Which is what happens when a person has been sitting alone with something for long enough that the first crack in the wall takes everything with it. Nate stood at the bottom step and waited. He did not move toward her. He did not reach out. He gave the moment, the room it needed, which is the thing most people do not know how to do, and which he had learned in 8 months of Thursday nights in a parking lot watching hospital windows was the most important thing. When she had steadied, she looked at the street again. "There are 94 of them," she said. 94, he said. "They all came for me? Every one?" She shook her head slowly. Then she said, "Henry would have been out here shaking every one of their hands." "Then we'll do it for him," Nate said. He held out his arm. She took it. They went down the porch steps together, and they shook 94 hands, starting at the near end of the column and moving to the far, and Loretta Sims said thank you 94 times and meant it differently each time, which is what happens when the same feeling is that full. And the men on the far end of the column who had ridden from Terre Haute and Springfield and Bloomington on a Saturday afternoon in November for a woman they had never met shook the hand of a 71-year-old woman in a good coat and did not say very much, because there was not very much that needed saying. The coffee cake came out of the freezer. All 6 of them. Someone produced a folding table from a truck bed, and it was set on the lawn, and there was coffee from a thermos that materialized from somewhere, And the afternoon did what afternoons do when they contain unexpected grace, which is to lengthen and slow and become the kind of thing people remember at the end of their days as one of the days that was worth the whole year. Nate left at 4:30, after the last bike had gone and the folding table had been folded, and Loretta was on her porch with a neighbor named Diane, who had come across the street at 2:15 and simply stayed. Because some things require a witness, and Diane had understood that immediately. He rode back toward the north side of Decatur. He parked in front of a diner on North Main and sat for a moment with the engine off, and then he took out his phone and looked at his daughter's number, which he had been looking at and not calling for 8 months of Thursday nights. He called it. It rang 4 times. She picked up. "Dad," she said. "Hey," he said. Neither of them spoke for a moment. "I've been in your parking lot," he said, "Thursday nights." "I didn't." He stopped. "I didn't know how to start the conversation." She was quiet. "I know," she said. "I've seen your bike." The silence that followed was the kind that has years in it. 3 years of the wrong distance between two people who do not know how to cross back, and it held for a moment that was long enough to feel, and then she said, "Are you hungry?" "I get off at 7. "Yeah," he said. "I'm hungry." "There's a diner on North Main," she said. He looked at the sign above the door in front of him. "I know it," he said. Loretta Sims told Marie in Columbus on Sunday morning. The conversation lasted an hour and 40 minutes, and Marie cried, and Loretta did not. Which was not because she didn't feel it, but because she had been sitting with it for 3 weeks and had done some of the crying already. In a parking lot on a Thursday night, with a stranger crouching against her car door in 31 degrees, and she was ready now to be the steady one, the one who held the shape of things while her daughter found her footing. She told Tom in Rockford on Sunday afternoon. Same length. Different tone. Tom asked practical questions, which was how Tom processed things. And Loretta answered them one by one with the patience of a woman who had spent 29 years keeping books. And when the questions were done, Tom was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "I'm coming down next weekend." And Loretta said, "I know you are." And that was that. She still writes the Christmas cards to Henry. She still draws the one line through his name, slowly. She still keeps them in the drawer beside his reading glasses. This year she added a card to the drawer with 94 names on it, written in the same careful cursive, because it seemed right to keep them in the same place. There are parking lots in every city in this country where someone is sitting alone at 11 at night with something they are not yet ready to take home. There are cars that won't start and phones at 11% and the specific cold of November coming in through the door seals. There are people who have been managing alone long enough that the managing has become the default, so complete and so practiced that the people who love them cannot see the seams. And then a man who has been watching hospital windows for 8 months on Thursday nights, working up to a conversation he can't yet find the beginning of, notices a car that hasn't moved, and he crosses the parking lot, and he crouches against the door in 31 degrees, and he listens. The rest? 94 motorcycles on a residential street on a Saturday in November, coffee cake from the freezer, 94 handshakes, an afternoon that lengthened and slowed. All of that comes from one man deciding that the car that hadn't moved was worth crossing 60 feet to check on. Nate Corbin had a conversation he needed to start. He had been sitting in a parking lot for 8 months working up to it. In the end, it took one woman alone in the dark to show him that the conversation was just a parking lot you had to cross. He crossed it. If this story reached you, if you believe that the person sitting alone in the parking lot deserves someone to notice, hit that like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you never miss the next story. And drop a comment below. Have you ever been the person in the car? Or the person who crossed the lot? Tell me. Tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one. Type Loretta in the comments if this one stayed with you.